Nobody expects the person whose song you're playing to sit down next to you while you are playing it. That is not a thing that happens. That is the kind of thing that happens in stories people tell at dinner tables years later, with the particular careful detail of someone who has told the story many times and still cannot quite believe it themselves. On this Thursday morning in May 1998, on the Place de la République in Paris, it happened. And what came after the sitting down was something that neither the man who sat down nor the man already sitting had planned or could have predicted. Something that assembled itself out of the particular combination of a portable keyboard, a Paris morning. A song written in 1982 when two people who both knew every note of it for completely different reasons. Paris, May 1998. The Place de la République, on a Thursday morning in late spring, had that particular quality of one of Paris's larger squares in the gentle warmth of May. Not the quiet of early morning, not the full afternoon activity, but the comfortable mid-morning life of a square that serves simultaneously as a transit point and a gathering place and a passage through which the city moves in all directions without quite stopping. The bronze Marianne at the center of the square stood, as she always stood. Arm raised, gaze fixed on something in the middle distance, entirely accustomed to being ignored. The café terraces on the surrounding boulevards were occupied with a mid-morning coffee crowd. Pigeons moved across the stone paving with their particular directional confidence. Cyclists passed in both directions. A woman walked a dog that was interested in everything and committed to nothing on the eastern side of the square, near the entrance to the Boulevard Voltaire. A man had set up a portable keyboard on a folding metal stand. His name was Théodore Blanchet, 47 years old, heavyset and broad across the shoulders, the build of a man who was once physically powerful and has settled into a comfortable version of that power. Grey hair cut short and neat, a grey and white beard trimmed close, round wire-framed glasses that sat slightly low on his nose. He wore a bright coral pink short-sleeve button shirt with small white dots on it, dark navy trousers with a generous cut brown leather loafers slightly worn at the heels, a pale yellow canvas tote bag on the ground beside his keyboard stand. He looked like what he was. A retired primary school music teacher from the 19th arrondissement who had taught children to play piano and recorder and the basics of music theory for 22 years, and who had developed, over those 22 years, the particular patience and warmth of someone whose job required making difficult things seem approachable to people who had not yet decided whether they were interested. He was not busking. There was no open case, no hat with coins. He was not performing for anyone. He was playing for himself. Something he did 3 mornings a week when the weather allowed. Bringing his portable keyboard and his folding stand to a public space and playing for an hour the way other people of his age went for walks or sat in cafes. The keyboard was a Casio CTK 7010 in dark grey, not a professional instrument, a good quality amateur keyboard with weighted keys that approximated the feel of a real piano reasonably well. He had owned it for 6 years and knew every quirk of its action. He was playing Johnny Halliday's J-10s, the 1982 ballad that had been a significant hit and which in the 16 years since its release had settled into that particular category of French songs that people of a certain age knew completely without always being able to name immediately. He played it well, not the playing of someone performing. The playing of someone who has lived with a piece of music for 16 years and knows it, the way you know the route between your apartment and your favorite cafe, without having to think about it. The hands finding the notes while the mind is somewhere associated with the music rather than focused on the mechanics of producing it. He played with his eyes partially closed, a slight movement in his upper body, the particular absorbed quality of someone who is not here but somewhere the music is. A man crossing the Place de la République from the direction of the Rue du Temple slowed down. He was doing what he did some Thursday mornings, walking through the city without a specific destination. The kind of walking that functions as thinking, where the feet handle the navigation and the mind handles something else. He wore a deep burgundy long-sleeve t-shirt under an open olive-green linen overshirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows, dark charcoal slim jeans, dark tan leather trainers with a white sole, a pair of round tortoiseshell sunglasses pushed up on his head. His graying brown hair slightly disheveled from walking, medium height, slightly broad-shouldered, 55 years old, the appearance of a man who got dressed this morning without thinking particularly hard about it, and happened to put together something that worked. He was Johnny Halliday. He heard the keyboard before he saw it. The particular sound of a digital keyboard in an open space, slightly thinner than a real piano but carrying the melody clearly across the stone paving of the square. He heard the melody and identified it with the immediate recognition of someone who has sung a song several hundred times and whose relationship with it exists at a level below conscious thought. He slowed, not stopped. Slowed. He saw the man at the keyboard, heavy-set, grey beard, round glasses, bright coral pink dotted shirt, completely absorbed, playing G to tens with the particular fluency of someone who has spent 16 years with a song. Johnny Halliday watched from a distance of 10 meters for approximately 40 seconds. Then he walked toward the keyboard. He did not announce himself. He did not say anything at all. He simply walked to the keyboard stand, pulled from the ground beside it the pale yellow canvas tote bag of Theodore Blanchet, gently moving it aside, and sat on the stone paving directly beside the keyboard stand, his back against the low stone border of one of the square's planted areas, his knees up, his arms resting on his knees. The position of someone settling in to listen for a while. Theodore Blanchet heard the movement beside him and opened his eyes. He looked at the man sitting on the paving beside his keyboard stand. His hands continued playing for approximately 3 more seconds on pure muscle memory, while his brain processed what his eyes were delivering. Then his hands stopped. The square continued its Thursday morning around them. A cyclist passed. 2 pigeons redirected their purposeful walk around the new human obstacle on the paving. Theodore Blanchet looked at Johnny Halliday sitting on the stone paving beside his keyboard stand, with his knees up and his arms resting on his knees. Johnny Halliday looked back at him over his tortoiseshell sunglasses, which had slid back down to their normal position on his face. "Don't stop," said Johnny Halliday. "You were in the right place in the second verse." Theodore Blanchet opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You're," he said. He did not finish the sentence because the sentence did not need finishing, and they both knew it. Johnny Halliday nodded. "Yes," he said. "Don't stop." Theodore Blanchet looked at his keyboard, then at his hands on the keys, then at Johnny Halliday on the paving beside him, then at his keyboard again. He began playing again. From where he had stopped, his hands found the position with the automatic competence of 22 years of teaching and personal practice. But his playing in the first 30 seconds after resuming had a quality it had not had before. Slightly self-conscious, slightly performed. The playing of someone who is now aware of being listened to by a specific person and cannot quite stop thinking about that. Johnny Halliday said from the paving, "You're thinking about it now. You weren't before." Theodore stopped again, looked at him. "How do you play it when you're alone?" said Johnny Halliday. "Not this version. The one from before I sat down." Theodore looked at him, then at the square around them. A woman with a pushchair passed without looking at either of them. A man in a yellow jacket cycling by glanced over without slowing. Nobody had recognized the man sitting on the paving in the burgundy t-shirt and olive linen shirt with the tortoiseshell sunglasses on his face. "I've been playing it for 16 years, said Theodore. "I know it better than I know most things." "Then play that version," said Johnny Halliday. "The one you know better than most things." Theodore Blanchet looked at his keyboard for a moment. Then he did something that required a specific act of decision. He put Johnny Halliday out of his mind. Not easily, not completely, but enough. He found the part of his mind that was associated with Thursday mornings and the square and the particular pleasure of playing something you know completely in an open space where nobody is watching. He found that part and moved into it, and played Jatatens the way he had been playing it when he was alone. It was different, not technically different. The notes were the same, the tempo was the same, something else. The quality of someone moving through familiar territory without self-consciousness, the way a person walks through their own home in the dark, knowing exactly where everything is, not needing to look. Johnny Halliday listened from the paving, his arms on his knees, his eyes on Theodore's hands on the keyboard. He listened to the whole song, 2 minutes and 50 seconds. without saying anything, without moving. When Theodore reached the end and his hands lifted from the keys, Johnny Halliday said, "You changed the left hand in the bridge. It's better than what I recorded." Theodore looked at his hands. "Aye," he said. "I didn't know I'd done that." "That's how you know it's yours now," said Johnny Halliday. Here is the first twist of this story. Johnny Halliday stood up from the paving, brushed the back of his charcoal jeans with one hand, and said, "Move over." Theodore looked at the keyboard bench. It was a folding metal stool, narrow, designed for one person. Johnny Halliday sat down next to Theodore Blanchet on the narrow folding metal stool, the two of them side by side in front of the Casio CTK 700 and Narc Grey on the Place de la République on a Thursday morning in May 1998. Johnny Halliday in his burgundy t-shirt and olive linen overshirt and dark charcoal jeans and dark tan trainers. Theodore Blanchet in his bright coral pink dotted shirt and dark navy trousers and brown loafers. Johnny Halliday put his hands on the right side of the keyboard. "Play it again," he said. "From the top. I'll take the right hand." Here is what the Place de la République heard for the next 40 minutes. Theodore Blanchet on the left hand of a Casio CTK 7-tine portable keyboard, and Johnny Halliday on the right hand of the same keyboard, sitting side by side on a narrow folding metal stool on the stone paving of the square, playing jatatans together. Then other songs. The repertoire assembling itself naturally from one song to the next, the way repertoires do when two people who know the same music find themselves playing together, each song suggesting the next one through some associative logic that neither of them directed but both of them followed. Gabriel. Queja time, Noir Noir. Liscopors Brise. Songs from the 1960s and 1970s and 1980s that both of them knew completely for different reasons. One because he had written them or performed them for decades. One because he had been teaching them to children and playing them alone on Thursday mornings for 22 years. The thing that happened to the square during these 40 minutes happened gradually and then all at once. 3 people stopped first, then 6. Then a woman who was passing called to her companion on the other side of the square and both of them came over. Then a man who had been sitting at a café terrace on the Boulevard Voltaire stood up and crossed the street to hear better. Then a group of tourists who had been photographing the Marianne statue turned and came toward the keyboard. Then people who were simply passing through the square stopped stopping and simply stayed. By the end of the 40 minutes there were approximately 80 people standing in a rough semicircle around the portable keyboard and its narrow folding metal stool on which 2 men in a burgundy t-shirt and a bright coral pink dotted shirt sat side by side playing songs that most of the 80 people knew, and some of the 80 people were singing quietly under their breath. Nobody in the growing crowd had recognized Johnny Halliday. Not yet. The tortoiseshell sunglasses, the unhurried ordinary posture, the complete absence of any of the apparatus of being a famous person. He was a man in a burgundy t-shirt sitting on a narrow stool next to a man in a pink shirt playing keyboard songs on a Thursday morning. Here is the second twist. A child recognized him. She was 9 years old, dark curly hair, wearing a bright yellow dress with white flowers on it and red sandals. She had been standing at the front of the gathered crowd with her father, a man in his 30s in a pale blue t-shirt and khaki shorts, for approximately 12 minutes, watching the 2 men play. Her father had not recognized either of them. His hand was on her shoulder, and his attention was on the music. The girl tugged his sleeve. "Papa," she said quietly. "That's Johnny Halliday." Her father looked at the man in the burgundy t-shirt on the narrow stool. Then he looked again with the verification process that recognition requires when the context is entirely unexpected. Then, very quietly, without saying anything, he took out his phone. He did not film immediately. He stood for a moment. Then he made a decision. Not to film, but to take one photograph. Quietly, without disrupting anything, he took the photograph, put the phone back in his pocket. This photograph. taken on a Thursday morning in May 1998 on the Place de la République by a man in a pale blue t-shirt with his daughter in a yellow dress at his side, showed two men sitting side by side on a narrow folding metal stool in front of a portable keyboard, one in a burgundy t-shirt and olive linen overshirt with tortoiseshell sunglasses and graying brown disheveled hair, one in a bright coral pink dotted short-sleeve shirt with round wire-framed glasses and a grey beard, both with their hands on the keyboard, both looking at the keys, neither looking at the camera or the crowd or anything except the music. The photograph was not published. The father, he showed it to people occasionally over the years, at dinner tables, at family gatherings, in the particular moment when someone says, "Tell me something that actually happened to you, that you can't quite believe." He showed it on his phone with the careful handling of someone showing something fragile, and every time he showed it he said the same thing. My daughter saw it first, 9 years old. I was standing right next to her, and she saw it first. The 40 minutes ended when Theodore Blanchet's portable keyboard produced 3 short beeps, the low battery warning of a Casio CTK 710 that had been running on AA batteries for 3 hours. Both men stopped playing at the same moment as the beeps sounded. Then both of them laughed, the simultaneous laughter of two people who have been so absorbed in something that an interruption from the external world lands as genuinely funny. The particular shared laughter of people who have been in the same place together. The crowd around them applauded. Johnny Halliday stood up from the narrow stool. He shook Theodore Blanchet's hand. A proper handshake, both hands. The particular warmth of two people who have just done something together that neither of them will forget. "Your left hand in the bridge," said Johnny Halliday. "Keep it. Don't go back to the original." Theodore Blanchet looked at him. He opened his mouth and closed it. Then he said the only honest thing available to him. "I've been playing your songs for 16 years, he said. "I've never had anyone to talk to about them." Johnny Halliday looked at him for a moment. Then he said, "You've been talking to them. That's better." He put his tortoiseshell sunglasses back in their normal position on his face, rolled his olive linen over shirt sleeves down from the elbows, put his hands in his charcoal jeans pockets, and walked back across the Place de la République, in the direction of the Rue du Temple, moving through the dispersing crowd with the unhurried ordinary pace of a man who had been somewhere pleasant on a Thursday morning and was now going somewhere else. Here is the final twist of this story. The following Thursday morning, Theodore Blanchet brought his portable keyboard and his folding stand and his pale yellow canvas tote bag to the same spot on the eastern side of the Place de la République near the entrance to the Boulevard Voltaire. He set up his keyboard, sat on his narrow stool, put his hands on the keys. He played Jatens with the left-hand variation in the bridge that he had not known he was doing until someone who had written the original version told him it was better. He played it all the way through. Then he sat for a moment with his hands in his lap. Around him the square continued its Thursday morning. Pigeons, cyclists, the bronze Marianne with her arm raised, coffee at the terraces on the Boulevard Voltaire, people passing in all directions. Nobody sat down next to him. He played for an hour, alone. The way he had been playing for 6 years on Thursday mornings before last week, but something was different about the playing and he knew it and could not explain it entirely. Something had settled into his hands during the 40 minutes on the narrow stool. Not a new technique, not a learned thing, something more like permission. The particular permission that comes from having been heard by exactly the right person at exactly the right moment. He played until the battery warning beeped, packed up his keyboard, picked up his pale yellow canvas tote bag, put on his round wire-framed glasses that had come off while he was absorbed in playing, and walked home through the Paris morning thinking about left hands and bridges and the particular way that songs accumulate inside people over 16 years until they become something slightly different from what they started as, something that belongs to both the person who made it and the person who has been living with it, equally without either of them having planned for it to work out that way. And here is what this Thursday morning in May 1998, on the Place de la République, leaves all of us. A man played someone else's song on a portable keyboard in a Paris square, the way he had been playing it alone for 16 years, until the person whose song it was sat down beside him and told him that the part he had changed, without knowing he'd changed it, was better than the original. Johnny Halliday that morning was not a rock star, making a generous appearance. He was a man who heard his own song being played in a public square and sat down on the stone paving and listened without announcing himself, and then moved over on a narrow stool and played the right hand while someone who had lived with his music for 16 years played the left. That is all. That was everything, because the thing that Theodore Blanchet received that Thursday morning on the narrow stool was not a famous person's time or attention or generosity. It was something more specific and more valuable than any of those things. It was confirmation. The confirmation that 16 years of playing a song alone in public spaces had done something real to it. That the song had become partly his. That the left-hand variation in the bridge that he did not know he was doing was actually better. You can spend 16 years doing something and not know if it amounts to anything, and then someone sits down next to you on a narrow stool and tells you the part you changed without knowing was better than what was there before. That is not a small thing. That is everything. And you? Have you spent years with something that you could not be sure was becoming what you hoped it was becoming? Tell us in the comments, because these are the stories that remind us that the confirmation we most need sometimes arrives in the most unexpected form. On a Thursday morning, on a narrow stool, from exactly the wrong person to be able to dismiss.